Daniels with Creek DeVault, and I'm co-chair this year of the United Way of Central Indiana engagement effort. Thank you very much. There, how's that? So it's a real honor to co-chair this with my co-chair, whom I'll introduce momentarily. We really appreciate you being here with us today. In partnership with the Indy Chamber, we're reaching out to our corporate colleagues and their employees in an effort critical to our ability to thrive as a community. We have a major problem in Central Indiana. Too many of our families are struggling with poverty. In fact, some 230,000 families, not individuals, but entire families, are either in poverty or just one missed paycheck away. We can't be a competitive community if we're leaving so many people behind. But the good news is that this community has always worked in a bipartisan way to solve big problems. And this is a time when we need to do that more than ever before. United Way of Central Indiana and the Indy Chamber are working toward the same goal, and we need your help. We're extremely honored to have with us today not only Michael Huber, president of the Indy Chamber, but also Mayor Hogsett and his 3 immediate predecessors as mayor, to lend their support to this effort, to help clarify the problem, and to discuss what we need to do together to solve it. This unprecedented show of support by these 4 mayors, all focused on one cause, demonstrates the depth of our community's need for your help. So now I'll introduce my co-chair, Mike O'Connor of Eli Lilly and Company. Mike?
Thank you, Deborah, and I'd like to state for the record that I was not the little Mike problem that Deborah was referencing as we started this. Like all of you, I'm proud to call Indianapolis and Central Indiana my home, and I've been blessed with the opportunity to serve my community in a variety of ways. I'm proud of the many accomplishments we've made as a competitive city, but I can't allow my pride in our city to look past our challenges. They are real, they are here, and they are complex. Our safety net system of delivery of help to our neighbors is being challenged like never before, and government cannot solve the problem alone. What I also know, and this is true in every facet of my life these days, yesterday's solutions will not solve today's problems. That's why the United Way, under Ann's leadership, has developed a new strategy to focus efforts and dollars on a 2-generation approach to help bring families out of poverty and to make sure that our efforts are having real and lasting impact. It's also why an organization like the Indy Chamber is leading an effort in inclusive growth, because the success of our community is tied to all of our success. And it's why we've asked you all to be here with us today. Deborah and I are the cheerleaders for this effort. You are the starting lineup. We started strategizing a few months ago about the strengths that the 2 of us brought to this effort, and the answer was clear, and it clearly wasn't our towering height. We're both proud members of our political parties, but we've always found a way to work together to help make our community a better place. Can you think of a better time for our community to say we're putting our own political stripes second and our community interest first? Can you think of a better way to send a message that we are indeed a competitive city? And can you imagine a better way to lead by example? Later this morning, we're going to hear from 4 people who have served our community, who made personal and professional sacrifices to make this a better place to live. 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, not an accident. None of the group ever asked the question, how do I make this a better place for my party? But rather they asked, what can I do to make this city a better place for all? Leading by example, making Indianapolis and Central Indiana a better place for all is a hallmark of our first speaker. Michael Huber is president and CEO of the Indy Chamber. He's just back from a leadership exchange visit to Denver and has been a visionary when it comes to the question of how do we make this a better place for us all. Please welcome Michael Huber.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Deborah. It's such an honor for the Indy Chamber to partner with United Way for many reasons, not the least of which is my admiration for Deborah and Mike, 2 people I've looked up to for a decade, really. Ann Mertlow's outstanding leadership of United Way of Central Indiana is well documented. She serves on our board of directors at Indy Chamber. And in a few minutes, you're going to hear from 4 mayors that have continued the upward trajectory of Indianapolis in a way that I think few people thought possible when, as some would say, this all started in the late 1960s. It's been an incredible ride. But to get our arms around the seriousness of the issue that United Way and its partners, of which we are one, are tackling with its 2Gen strategy and other initiatives, I want to make a few contextual comments before we introduce the mayors. So, to understand the gravity of this problem, you have to keep in mind at least two visions of Indianapolis. One is Forbes magazine last year, top 10 cities for young professionals. Indianapolis was on that list. Livability magazine had Indianapolis as the #3 downtown in America. Brookings Institute study released last year showed Indianapolis as one of the top 5 cities for advanced industry job growth. Advanced industry job growth defined as STEM and R&D jobs. There's a part of our economy, we are that good, thanks to the leadership of everybody in this room. And yet, one of the things that's very alarming to us is the low economic mobility of Indianapolis for those neighbors of ours who are born into poverty. According to the Raj Chetty Economic Mobility Study, from 2014, Indianapolis was in the bottom 5 of our top 50 population metros for economic mobility, in this case defined as if you're born in the bottom 20%, what are the chances of you getting to the top 20% in your lifetime? We've had an 80% increase in our neighbors in poverty just in the last decade. And we've also become a much more economically segregated region. One study had us going from the 53rd most segregated region economically 20 years ago to the 6th most economically segregated region today. Now, this is a distinctly American problem, and I can't emphasize that enough, but it does have some real serious impacts in Indianapolis. One huge reason is the disruption of our manufacturing base. 20% of the jobs in our manufacturing base have left in the last decade, much more to automation and to technology. So you get this picture of automation creating exciting jobs and opportunities on one side of the economy, and that's great. So we see the growth in that sector, but automation disrupting a significant part of our community. And the impacts of multi-generational poverty are really, really being felt now. And so without swift action like the kind that's being contemplated by United Way 2Gen strategy, along with many, many partners, this trend would continue. The other thing that's changed is in the way that we talk about these issues is making a difference for people in poverty is no longer something we think of as charity. It is a competitiveness issue. If we've got an increasing part of our economy that we're losing to multi-generational poverty, that we can't move to higher levels of self-sufficiency, we cannot compete as a region for the jobs of the future. We can't compete with cities, and we are competing with cities now because of the leadership of these 4 mayors like Denver and Austin and Nashville, Tennessee, really exciting markets, and we are right there by many of our measures. But we've got a significant problem in Indianapolis with a growing percentage of our neighbors feeling the effects of poverty. There is hope, however, on the horizon. You witness the current mayoral administration's focus on workforce and job readiness, on significantly increasing access to education. Kudos to Mayor Joe Hogsett for those efforts. Our communities come together with a strong support of expanding mass transit, which will help people across low, mid, and upper incomes access jobs, amenities. The other thing is there's a civic community here in Indianapolis that is really significant. I personally would put our last 6 mayors, if you add Hudnut and Lugar, I would put them up against any other group of 6 mayors in the country, any city in the country, hands down. And you notice it's also a group of 6 mayors who represent both political parties. The last thing I'll say before introducing our MC, Fanchon Stinger, is that United Way of Central Indiana has made many tough choices to perfectly align to take this on in the 2Gen strategy. I know these have not been easy choices. The human services and social services is very dynamic. The needs are changing all the time, and therefore the approach changes all the time. But the Indy Chamber, as Michael Connor said, our increasing focus on inclusive growth, that is using the full range of economic development tools to address communities in need, is 100% in alignment with United Way's 2Gen strategy, and that's why I'm so honored to be here today and to hear from our 4 mayors here in a moment. So now I'd like to turn it over to someone that you know well as a journalist, and she's also well known as someone who is very philanthropic and gives very generously of her talents and gifts to community causes. She cares very deeply about the community, and we so appreciate Fanchon Stinger from Fox 59 being here to serve as our MC for this conversation with 4 mayors. Please welcome Fanchon.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much. Good morning. Good morning on this Colts Blue Thursday. You know, traditionally, sports has been something that has united us across party lines. Traditionally, it has been. So what a great day to start. Hopefully, we're going to beat the Patriots tonight. You know, no Deflategate, hopefully, this season. But it is an honor to be with you this morning and to lead this most important conversation. The power that we have is in working together. And the good book reminds us that we are to always remember and treat other people's interests and concerns more important than our own. And that is what's going to help us come across party lines and work to put people's futures, our children, and where we're going as a city at the forefront of our goals. And that's what today is really about. So I'm excited to bring up our mayors. I'm not going to waste any time because we have a tight schedule. We want to respect your time and theirs. So right now I do want to just give you a few little notes. You have a note card that you saw on your chair, this note card. Please keep this handy as we're talking through this conversation. If there are questions, we're going to try and take 1 or 2, maybe 3 questions at the end. We want everyone to feel as though you are a part of this. So if something comes to mind, write that down. Someone will come to the end of your row and pick that up at the appropriate time. A United Way staff member will handle that. Like I said, we're going to try and include as many questions as possible. We are also live streaming this event on Facebook. That's a special treat. We're opening this up to a wider audience. So let's turn around and wave. Where's our Facebook camera? Right there. Wave to our Facebook audience. We want them to feel a part of today. Thank you for being with us and joining us online and being a part of this important conversation. And like I said, and it's been so eloquently pointed out before, poverty is a generational and cyclical issue, meaning there is hope when we come together and work together. So today is a day of hope. We're going to talk about hope. Hope for our next generation, hope for our families, and most importantly, hope for our children. I want to introduce our most esteemed mayors. First, please help me welcome Stephen Goldsmith. Stephen Goldsmith served 2 terms as the 46th mayor of Indianapolis from 1992 to 2000. As mayor, Goldsmith sought to improve opportunity to all Indianapolis residents by restoring neighborhoods, re-engineering the city's delivery of services to the public, and making the city competitive and safe. Currently, Steve is the Daniel Paul Professor of the Practice of Government and the Director of Innovations in Government Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. He directs Data Smart City Solutions, the Project on Municipal Innovation, the Civic Analytics Network, and Operational Excellence in Government. It's a wonder he had time to come here today. Steve is a graduate of Wabash College and earned his degree in law at the University of Michigan Law School. He's a fellow Wolverine. Go Blue.
And Broad Ripple High School.
And Broad Ripple High School. We don't want to forget that. Thank you for that addition. Absolutely. Next, I would like to introduce Bart Peterson. Bart Peterson became the first Democrat to win the office since 1967 and served 2 terms as Indianapolis's 47th mayor from 2000 to 2007. Peterson's accomplishments include BioCrossroads, a focused effort to push Indianapolis to the forefront as a life sciences capital, the establishment of charter schools, and oversight of the construction of Lucas Oil Stadium and expansion of the convention center, which we are still enjoying immensely today. He also served as president of the National League of Cities in 2007. Bart retired in 2017 as senior vice president of corporate affairs and communications for Eli Lilly and Company, where he also served as a member of the company's executive committee. He received a bachelor's degree from Purdue University and earned his law degree at the University of Michigan Law School. So many Wolverines. Go Blue. Thank you for joining us, Bart Peterson. We appreciate that. This rarely happens, so just indulge me when Okay, I'd like to now bring up former Mayor Greg Ballard. Greg Ballard was sworn into office on Tuesday, January 1st, 2008, at the Indiana War Memorial, a nod to his long-term military career as U.S. Marine, and we thank him for his service. As Indianapolis's 48th mayor from 2008 to 2016, Ballard navigated the city through the Great Recession by taking creative approaches to raising revenue. He oversaw significant growth in downtown, the residential development. He led our community during one of our most prestigious moments in time, which you all remember, when all eyes were focused on Indianapolis for the 2012 Super Bowl 46. An enormous effort and a great success. Greg is currently a visiting fellow at the University of Indianapolis. He earned a degree in economics from Indiana University. Thank you for being here, Greg. And finally, please welcome the 49th mayor of our great city of Indianapolis, the Honorable Joe Hogsett. As Mayor Joe Hogsett is using the same results-oriented approach that he cultivated during his time as a federal prosecutor. He is focusing on neighborhood development, public safety, and the fiscal well-being of our city. During Mayor Hogsett's time in office, he has lifted the city's 35-year moratorium on new streetlights. We're seeing those go in. He returned IMPD to a community-based policing model and created Indianapolis's first comprehensive youth summer employment plan, all while still cutting overall city spending and building a bipartisan coalition dedicated to moving Indianapolis forward. Mayor Hogsett earned his bachelor's degree from Indiana University. He received graduate degrees from Butler University and the Christian Theological Seminary. He earned his law degree from Indiana University. Please welcome Mayor Hogsett. Thank you. And once again, welcome you to Four Mayors, One Cause. The cause in today's presentation, you've heard about it already, poverty. More specifically, those members of our community who are struggling to satisfy the most basic needs. Most needs that we take for granted each and every single day. We know that Indianapolis and Central Indiana have changed over the years. But mayors, I want to start with this, and I'm going to address this question to each of you as we go down the line. Can each of you tell us your observations from when you were mayor about the challenges facing people in poverty and what that means in terms of the future of our city? Mayor Goldsmith, I want to start with you on that. I can hand the mic right over. Okay.
Gives me time to figure out what my answer is to the question. Well, I mean, the question obviously covers the whole event and all the issues United Way and the Chamber are working on. So, I mean, a couple ways to think about this issue would be the concentration of poverty, and all of us up here have spent a fair amount of time in all Indianapolis neighborhoods. I remember when I was first elected, I went to a community meeting in Hawville where a mom was complaining about needing to put her child in the bathtub at night because of stray bullets going through the window. And then I went up to a suburban community, and they were complaining about the grass cutting on the medians of the roadway, which was a legitimate complaint, but it just reflected we live in kind of two different communities, right? And the increasing concentration of poverty, right? Educational opportunities, the issues of child welfare, the issues of nutrition. So rather than just kind of talk forever, I could lead to a lot of anecdotes, but they basically come down to, as poverty gets more concentrated, opportunity gets more limited. Yeah. This intergenerational strategy is important, but we need to kind of start now and kind of reverse the trend.
All right. Mayor Peterson.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of ways to view this. One is through the eyes of somebody who is in a family that's suffering from poverty, and I don't know that I'm the best person to describe what that world looks like through their eyes, but I can tell you that it is, we all know, and that's the whole reason we're here, we all know the incredible challenges that people who live on very, very low incomes face. And one of the things I think about all the time is what the term that was coined, decades ago, the high cost of being poor. And just to give you an example, food deserts are a very well-known challenge in our city and many other cities. People are going to so-called convenience stores because they're the closest place to buy food. They're buying inferior food for higher prices. Just one of many examples of challenges that people living in poverty face. But for our city, to look at it through the lens, the broader lens of our city, I'll take a term that Steve used. Maybe they taught this at Michigan Law School, but the term concentration of poverty, I think, is very significant, because the more poverty we have in our city, the more families we have living in poverty, almost by definition, the more instances of concentration of poverty you're going to have, geographical concentration, the larger those concentrations are going to be, and nothing good comes out of vast swaths of concentrated poverty in a city. High crime and many other social ills are bred in such environments. So, from our city's perspective, this is as high a priority as Mayor Hogshead has made it, which is the top priority.
Mayor Ballard?
I'm on the Women's Fund Advisory Board, and they have an analysis of what the poor spend their money on, and it's very interesting if you look at it. But I would suggest to you that all of us knew that instinctively. But there's one example that I heard that really stuck with me for a long time. There's a lady over in Devington, elderly lady. I used to live in Devington when I was from 12 years old. I lived in the 46 in Arlington area. And she came up to me and said, "Mayor, I really can't get around. I'm on hourly, and I have to go to a specialist at 56 in Georgetown," which ironically is almost exactly where I live right now. So all this was kind of near and dear to my heart when she was speaking to me. But she said, "I have to get up in the morning and I have to take 3 buses, and it takes me all day." Since she's on hourly, she gets no money. And it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out that I and everybody in this room, if we were to go to a specialist at 56 in Georgetown area, we'd get in our car, lose a couple hours of work. We're all on salary. We don't lose a dime of income. She lost a whole day's worth of income to go to somebody that she had to go see. And so the economic mobility piece of me kind of kicks in, and I see that. I think that's why I see Mike Terry over there. He knows exactly what I'm talking about, why that has been so important to me. But it is important to realize that it is very difficult to be poor without the ability to move forward, because we don't really have those mechanisms in place. I don't think we do, to the level where we can actually make it easier on them to move up the chain. I'm very fortunate. I'm probably one of the few people that did go from where we started in the bottom 20% to the upper 20%. But that I am by far the exception in this city and most cities across the nation. But it's those pieces that we can put into place, like transportation and quality food, to make it easier for the poor to move up. And there's a lot of others besides that, obviously, but some of the basics are not in place yet. And I don't think Jim Morris is in here, but Jim Morris says, the ability, the quality of a community depends on the children, and are the children fed, because nobody learns on an empty stomach. Those are the sorts of things I remember all the time I was the mayor, and they really kind of stuck with me. It's a difficult, protected problem, right? It is.
Mayor Hogshead?
Well, first, I want to thank everyone for coming together today. The mayors have already laid our challenge out, I think, quite well. Let me just add one observation. Every consultant in the world will tell you when you happen to offer yourself up for a public office during the election cycle, they'll say one thing: do not talk about poverty. People do not want to hear how challenged as a community we are, how impoverished people in the community are. And for the United Way, for the Chamber, and all of you, along with my colleagues, to really prioritize poverty for the city of Indianapolis speaks volumes about our community. And frankly, we all know one thing is true above all else, and that is when Indianapolis puts its head together, we get things done. And that's why I'm passionately optimistic that we can turn the tide and make a difference for the betterment of our community. So again, thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. Thank you for being committed to helping make Indianapolis be an even better place than it already is.
Thank you, mayors. I'm excited to hear how you answer this question. As mayor, you took or are taking, in the case of Mayor Hogsett, specific actions to help spur economic development and bring along those who struggle to enjoy full participation in our economy. You just said how difficult and challenging this is. My question, I'm going to start with you, Mayor Hogsett. Can you name something that Mayor Ballard did in this regard that you thought had the potential to make a difference in the lives of those people? And yes, you're on the hot seat.
Well, I want to make sure that I don't extend my time because there are several things that I could say about the Ballard years and the Ballard administration. Pre-K would be one of them. I think that's an important initiative. Mayor Ballard's expansion of educational opportunity first begun under Mayor Peterson through our mayoral-sponsored charter schools. But I think, as I think back about Mayor Ballard's tenure, perhaps the most significant and overarching legacy that his administration left was the emerging science and technology sector that our city now enjoys. And I think that that has the potential to be a game changer in terms of economic empowerment, economic mobility, and economic opportunity. Because the truth is, you no longer need a four-year college degree to be gainfully employed in the tech sector. And by the way, I should also add, Mayor Ballard's emphasis on technology was quite diverse. He has been a leading light for women in tech. So on a lot of different levels, I think the Ballard legacy is one that we can all be very proud of and that I hope to continue to build upon.
Excellent. Mayor Ballard, can you name something that Mayor Peterson did that you felt had the potential to improve the prospects of those less fortunate to succeed in our economy?
Well, this is actually, I probably have the easiest. That's the easiest question for me because of what he did in education. Was game changing for the city. And educational opportunities, as I mentioned before, education is, at least for me, was the ticket. And he literally gave thousands of kids a better opportunity to succeed in life by having a very strong political will to what he considered to do the right thing. And it took a lot of guts on his part because I'm sure that he took a lot of heat within his own party to do that. And he had to have a lot of difficulty, I would think, at the State House at times also. I think he had some partners over there, and he probably has some people who are probably not so friendly to his initiatives. But it might have been worse, but it might have been different than you think, right? And I'm not talking about party lines necessarily. So that, to me, that was a game changer for the city and continues to this day and will stay with us, that we are still looked upon nationally in a certain way regarding education because of Mayor Peterson. I don't think there's any question about that.
That's incredible. Mayor Peterson, speaking of, what about something Mayor Goldsmith did during his tenure to lift up struggling individuals and families?
Well, yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm going to mention two things, and I hate to be one of those people who says I'm going to say two things and then can't remember the second one. So the second one is 23rd and Keystone. I want to come back to that. But the first one is one that I have talked about a lot over the years, and something that I've often thought that Mayor Goldsmith doesn't get enough credit for, and that is the way he empowered neighborhood leaders. One of the most important things that can help change neighborhoods and can help change the livelihoods and the opportunities of people in neighborhoods is to be able to speak for themselves and to be able to stand up for themselves, not to be at the mercy of their elected officials and how much they advocate, not to be at the mercy of anybody, but to be able to chart their own course. And what the mayor did in a very intentional way over his entire 8 years was build up systematically a way of identifying and training and encouraging individual neighborhood leaders. And I know when I took office, that group was there, it was strong, it was effective, and it was a voice that you just didn't hear from elected officials and from other sources. And I know that that's continued to this very day, and I think it is somewhat unique in Indianapolis, although I think it's a gospel that ought to be preached everywhere. So first of all, congratulations on that. I think it's one of your great legacies. I don't know if you remember this or not, but when we were in our transition from your leadership to mine, you mentioned that the thing I would have the most fun with was a new industrial park at 23rd and Keystone. And you had started this, and it was invested a whole bunch of money, acquired most of the land, And while I can't look back on my 8 years and say it was the most fun thing I did, because it really all turned out to be just sort of it marched on and with a lot of good involvement of a lot of people across the community. It's a place that's now full of buildings and providing jobs. And I bring that up not because it's necessarily the most significant such development in the entire United States, but because it's symbolic of the most important problem I think that we have in urban communities, and that is a lack of good jobs. To identify places in the core of the city, to redevelop with good, well-paying jobs that have career potential. I mean, this is what we've lost, right? We all know this. We've lost this over many, many decades. And to have those jobs closer to where people live who need those kinds of jobs, I think is something we need to continue to really focus on. And I had the pleasure of carrying on what you had started in that regard.
It's interesting, and I'm sure you guys probably are hearing this too. One of the common commitments, the thread through all this is access and opportunity, which leads directly to hope. There is hope. And speaking of that, economic mobility, when we talk about access and we talk about opportunity, there's really no silver bullet. That's why we're talking about poverty today. Thinking, mayors, of the most difficult problems you encountered or are encountering today in your administration, give us an example of an issue that was more complex than commonly understood in the public, something that maybe the public sees, they don't understand how complex it is, and how you avoided inadvertent harm to our more vulnerable population while trying to lift up the entire city's economy. Mayor Huggs, I'm going to start with you since you're in the thick of it right now.
Tough question.
It is a tough question. I guess in this administration, it would be our efforts to holistically reform our criminal justice system, and that profoundly is inextricably linked with poverty. It is a very complicated effort, but we're making progress. The fact that the community justice campus that is proposed for the Twin Air neighborhood will contain a behavioral assessment and treatment facility, kind of a first of its kind for us, so that people who suffer from addiction, people who suffer from substance abuse, mental health challenges, mental illness, can hopefully be diverted out of the costly criminal justice system and get the treatment that they so justly deserve, so that we can stop this revolving door of justice. And in furtherance of your question, Fanchen, I mean, not only will that profoundly impact the way criminal justice is delivered by Marion County, but frankly, the added benefit is it empowers a neighborhood that is in desperate need of uplift. I mean, since the closure of the Citizens Coke plant back in, I think, 2007, Mayor, I think Citizens closed that site. Those neighborhoods have suffered in that area. So it's an issue that profoundly impacts, I think, this topic that we're discussing today, and goes to the very root causes of poverty, but also is an economic development tool that hopefully will lift up the southeast corridor of our city.
Any other mayor want to add to that? Or
That's a difficult question, but there was something that I think probably all of us have to go through, and I went through the recession. That was really hard to have declining revenues while you're trying to build up a city, as we have been doing ever since then Mayor Lugar. And I think you feel the weight of that on your shoulders when you're the mayor of Indianapolis. That so many people have gone before you. The city has moved together with great people like you, because I think we do a really good job of teaming everybody up together in this city to move forward. But it was difficult to try to expand, as Mayor Hawks had said, about the opportunities, the tech opportunities, the growing the tax base is something which I've really concentrated on, because you may have to spend some time growing the tax base, and then people worry that you're not spending enough time addressing some of the issues of poverty. But when you're trying to grow the tax base, you are actually trying to address the issues of poverty. You're just not doing it in the immediate. And sometimes during a recession with declining revenues, the immediate, it becomes really, really critical. And so balancing balancing the need to address those things that are staring you right in the face versus looking out to the future. And we have to continue to expand our economy in the city of Indianapolis so that future needs are alleviated. That's a really difficult thing to do. I was very lucky. Mike Huber was on my team, and I had so many other good people. But we really did try to concentrate on that. And all of us, you get beat up for not doing this, and you only got so much in the budget, right? You only got so much.
Yeah.
So people want you to do this, but balancing growing the economy to alleviate future needs versus what's staring you right in the face right now is always a very difficult proposition, particularly in a recession.
It's a very delicate balance. I don't mean to cut you off. I want to direct this specifically to Mayor Goldsmith. Why do you think we rank so low in social mobility? We kind of touched on some various reasons, especially as compared to the rest of the country. And how do you recommend we improve?
Well, that's the question, right? And,
Yeah.
and we've been rapidly going the wrong direction, actually, as Mike's numbers reflected, and that's the fundamental issue. So, probably your questions are so complex, and there's so many of us here to talk, so I'm trying to do this quickly. So, Indianapolis has not a totally great history. It has a great history in terms of civic engagement. It doesn't have a great history in terms of racial segregation, school segregation. IPS was legitimately under a court order, right? And to some extent, we see the legacy of that pulled forward. We have a great racial and poverty concentration, and so that's one issue. And I tell Bart that thank goodness he was successful with IPS reform, because I failed at everything I did. But so long as in the education area, so long as substantial numbers of young men and women don't graduate from high school, let alone college, we're going to continue this kind of this issue. So how do we think about getting out of it? Well, that's not so easy. One, obviously, would be the school reforms that have started and are going reasonably well in Indianapolis today. A second is how do we link people? One more anecdote. We've all been, we all had daily anecdotes. I was in a conversation in the mayor's office. I can't believe Hogshead still has the same furniture in the office that I had. I mean, I thought we were cheap. But how cheap can you be?
It's called frugality, Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I was in a meeting in the mayor's office when I was mayor in the same furniture, and we were talking with these kind of neighborhood leaders that Bart mentioned, and one guy stood up and said, you really need to work through me. And I said, well, why you? And I said it more politely than that. And he said, because I'm the only adult male in this 2-block area that has a job in this community, right? So if we think about the fact that our economy in Indianapolis has done really well in its tech growth, and so we have this kind of bifurcated economy, and so the question then becomes, how do we link people who are not in the real economy to the future economy? That's your multi-generational issue, which obviously is a complicated one. It's the investment in the social infrastructure. It's the Indigo changes in transportation, because if you can't get at a job, then you can't get to the job, and if you're an hourly worker and it takes you an hour to get there, that's expensive. And then but we need coaches and we need mentors, because the opportunity networks of the folks in the room compared to the folks in those neighborhoods are just totally different, right? Think about the opportunities our children have compared to children in those neighborhoods. So how do we coach them? How do we mentor them? How do we link them when they're in high school to meaningful jobs? How do we remove the obstacles to meaningful jobs? Because we do have some credentialing in the community that's not necessary. Some requirements of college degrees is not necessary. The Chamber's doing great work in kind of disaggregating the way we kind of look at the components of jobs. So just kind of in summary, since you asked me like this 7-hour question,
That was the intention.
I'd look at the neighborhood
Yeah.
revitalization that Mayor Hogshead is continuing to do. I'd look at the changes in transportation. I'd look at the ways that we can link young adults to opportunity while they're still in high school, and we have a chance to pull them forward. We'll look at the intergenerational poverty issues that start in pre-K that Greg addressed, and we take it all in and just like last, when I really appreciate what Bart said about me, because we were very conscientious about that. Nobody until you's ever really noticed it, so I'm really quite flattered. But we took 7 neighborhoods of 8 to 20,000 people each, and invested several $100 million in those neighborhoods, trying to do everything to bring them around. And some places we succeeded and some we failed. And where we succeeded, it was because the other institutions that were there, the nonprofits and the schools were succeeding, it's because neighborhood leaders played a part. So United Way has a big responsibility and a very difficult challenge and a really complicated, but we're creating jobs in Indianapolis, so there should be opportunity.
I want to shift a little bit to engagement, especially community engagement. I think Mayor Hogsett touched a little bit on this, but beyond policy, beyond regulation, beyond governmental ability, there has to be a level of compassion. And how do you get people to move? And you and Mayor Goldsmith, you talked about the segregation. You talked about some of those things that this city has to still overcome, or we have, and we still are working to overcome. There has to be a level of heart change individually in people. So my next question kind of starts to touch on that in terms of interjecting compassion, changing people's heart, and making it a priority, not because it's the right thing to do, but because we believe in it and we care about the people that we're working for. So as the private sector, who can collectively assist with some of the problems that have been raised today, especially the problems that have been raised by Mr. Huber, what can the private sector do to help in this? And I'm going to also add to this because we're running a little short on time. Is there anything that you've seen in other cities that we could use that really works, that we could implement here in Indianapolis when it comes to the private sector and all of us joining together? Anyone can jump in on that one.
Well, I'll start off, and I guess a little bit of the advantage of not being engaged in urban policy and politics directly for the last 10 or 11 years. I kind of looked at things as a fairly knowledgeable outsider and watched what other cities are doing. And I'm a free market guy. I'm a capitalist. All of those things. But I look at the movement around a higher minimum wage now, and think that we've got to take a serious look at this. And Amazon just announced it's going to pay all of its employees at least $15 an hour. We're getting to a point where so many people are working. They're working 40-hour-a-week jobs, or they're working 2 jobs at 60 or 70 hours a week, and they're not making any money. They're not making enough money to live on. And how we I don't like the idea of government mandating wages directly for a individual company, but I think we have to start taking a serious look at something that I probably didn't take seriously enough in the last decade or so, and that is raising the minimum wage, not just a little bit, but substantially, so that there's a living wage opportunity for everybody who's willing to work and able to work. And I think that's something that that may have to come from the private sector. It may have to be a competitive thing. That would be preferable, because I like that a lot better than government ordering it. But I think we have to get there one way or the other.
Anyone else want to jump in on that? We're
I
short,
just want to
so
give you
just
a 15-second political speech here, since we're all non-political. I mean, I would bet that today in Indianapolis, we're back to the same percentage of wealth living in the city versus the metro area as before Dick Lugar unified government, right? And so massive amounts of money have gone to the suburbs. And back when Bill Hudnett was mayor, and still a little bit when I was mayor, there was this kind of resentment that all the money and all the jobs and everything was in Indianapolis, in the region, right? Well, now the poverty is in Indianapolis. And if you want to ask what employers can do, then it is the Central Indiana United Way, and the Chamber is Central Indiana. But employers and residents in the surrounding county need to look at the economic opportunity of individuals who live in the region, particularly in Indianapolis, who are poor, as a moral and economic imperative, and participate, right? And you can't just make it any longer an Indianapolis issue.
Well said. Well said. All right. Final question, gentlemen, and quickly on this, because I want to keep time. We want to get to some questions. If you guys have questions, start writing those questions down. This is the final question. It should not be very long in terms of the answer. What's the best piece of advice you've received as mayor of Indianapolis, and who gave it to you? Best piece of advice you've received as mayor of Indianapolis, and who gave you that advice?
Let me begin,
Okay.
because it's advice given to me by one of our former mayors who's not with us, Bill Hudnett. Shortly after the election in 2015, actually quite frequently after the election in 2015, Mayor Hudnett called me to tell me what I needed to be doing. And one of the pieces of advice he gave me that I still carry with me today is, he said, sometimes doing something big, really big, is easier than doing something small. That kind of epitomizes, I think, Bill Hudnut's life. And I think what he was advising me is don't become victim of incrementalism. And how more appropriate to our discussion today than his advice, sometimes doing something big as a community to really transform our community is easier than just the short stops.
Powerful. Mayor Ballard?
Be kind, Jim Morris.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Interestingly, mine was also from Bill Hudnut, and it was also at the same period of time between my election and when I took office. And he said to me, wrap your arms around the city. The city needs the mayor to embrace it. And that can mean a dozen things, right? But in the context of today, it means you've got to be the mayor of everybody. And you've got to, it's not about your political party, it's not about your campaign donors, it's not about the people you're going to run into all the time at cocktail parties. It's not about the loud or more aggressive people who get in your face all the time, day in and day out, the ones you see over and over and over again. It's about those, it's about the quiet people who are living in the shadows, and you've got to go seek them out and embrace them.
Smith.
Mine's the same vein, although it was not somebody political. It's from my mother. My mother was a Democrat. My father was a Republican. My mother told me I ought to get out and visit people where they live, and I become more compassionate like her. So I tried to do that.
Beautiful. Moms always have good advice. Gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your hearts with us today. Your wisdom, your compassion. Thank you very, very much. I want to say thank you to our Facebook Live audience for tuning in and being with us. I want to ask you now to write your questions that you have. While you're doing that, I'm going to bring up a dear friend, Ann Mertlow, right now, and she's going to continue us on. And I'll be right back.
Thank you, Fanchen. I also want to thank Mike O'Connor and Deb Daniels for your dedication to United Way and for your passionate leadership in making Central Indiana a better community for our children, our neighbors, our families, and our businesses. I want to thank Mike Huber and his colleagues over at the Indy Chamber, as well as Beth White and her members at the Greater Indianapolis Progress Committee. We know that we are all in this together. These problems are long-term, and they have no quick fixes. So we have to work together in partnership if we're going to make a change. I'd like to thank WFYI and Salesforce for your ongoing partnership with United Way in making events like this possible, and also Salesforce.org for our partnership in creating a next-generation platform called Salesforce.org Philanthropy Cloud, which we believe will be a real tool to help our community, our companies, and individuals really step in to making a difference. To corporate leaders in the room and to our fans and friends on Facebook Live at this moment, you heard our civic leaders and mayors discuss the statistics, reflect on strategies, and respectfully debate the potential solutions to poverty in our community. But even with all the brain power on this stage, experience in this room, and leadership throughout the community, there is no single magic answer to solving our community's most complex social problems. These issues require both a short and long-term lens. They require us working together. They require us being nimble in our approaches. We do know that there is magic when a community really mobilizes around an issue. And it takes all of us, Democrats, Republicans, corporate leaders, nonprofit organizations, and everyday citizens, all of us in this diverse community, to advocate for better public policies, show up in our community to volunteer, be educated on our community's most complex challenges, and most importantly, it takes all of us to care. We must care about those more than 230,000 families in Central Indiana living in or one step away from poverty. We must care where we fall in the rankings for health, crime, education, and housing. We must care that what we do or don't do today will have a lasting effect on generations to come. We must care to act. We must change what we're doing when what worked in the past no longer addresses current challenges. We must act boldly to build the community we want to have tomorrow. And we must act together in even more meaningful ways to address cross-sector challenges that threaten the stability and prosperity of our community and limit opportunity for all. I'd like to answer the mayor's best advice question, except I want to offer the advice that I regularly give to new leaders when I'm asked. And my advice is this: people in our community, including our younger generations, really want to have a meaningful role in shaping their lives and the communities that they live in. So as leaders in the community, let's find the opportunities for them to do it. For the corporate leaders in the room, how can you lead by example in your work environment? How can you motivate your employees in ways that are meaningful to them? For our audience on Facebook, what motivates you to get involved in your community? United Way stands ready to help. Thank you, Mayor Hogsett, Mayor Ballard, Mayor Peterson, and Mayor Goldsmith for your leadership of our great city, your presence here today, and for reminding us just how important it is for us all to live united. Thank you.
Beautiful, Anne. As always, thank you. All right, literally, and I promised I would keep us on time. We literally have 3 minutes, so I want to at least get 2 questions in if we can. And I really like this one because, where is it? We talked a little bit about health challenges. When asked about health challenges, we understand addressing mental health issues, quality of life issues. There is a focus on that now. So I want to move to the township system. I know one thing when I first moved to Indianapolis, coming from the city of Detroit, the township system to me was very different. And I didn't quite, it took me time to understand it and the power of it. So this question I think is interesting. What impact does the township system in Indianapolis have in addressing the concentration of poverty, and what opportunities does it present? And again, we just have 3 minutes left, so quick.
Well, I'd just say that one of the best pieces of advice that I was ever given prior to being mayor was by former Governor Matt Welsh, who said, "Whatever you do, don't take on the township trustees." No, I think that there
I
is
wish he had told me that.
What's that?
Why didn't you pass that along?
You didn't get that memo, Mayor. I think that there's a real opportunity, and frankly, because we're short on time, I really do think that township government needs to be, and township leaders need to be included in these conversations as we together as public-private partners address the root causes of poverty. So,
Okay. Anyone else want to jump on that? Anything else? Okay, I don't want to cut anyone off. I'm going to get one more in here. What time is it? Hold on. Okay, 1 minute. Okay, I'm going to go right to this, and we're going to end on a light note. And I'm just curious, too, because I'm a journalist, so I'm a little nosy. Besides home, when you were mayor and you wanted to wind down, power down, and get away from it all, where in Indy did you go? We're going to end on that. It's a good question.
That's easy. The recliner in my bedroom.
Okay. Perfect place. Private and quiet, right?
I'm actually pretty introverted, so staying at home was a wonderful thing.
Well, I'll just say this about the people of Indianapolis. I knew that my job was taking me away from my family a lot. So every opportunity we had, we would go out to dinner together, the three of us. And I can count on one hand the number of times when somebody came up and, probably less than one hand, the number of times that somebody came up and was rude or interrupted us in a way that kind of left me feeling a little sour. People are really nice in this city, and they're actually nice to their elected officials as well, which is, I'm not sure you see that everywhere.
As Deborah knows, I have a personality defect, and I never realized you could take any time off until the end of the 8th year. So I don't know what the answer to that question is.
Well, at least you're honest. Okay, well, thank you. All right, so, well, Mayor Hogsett, I almost feel bad asking you this because you might be telling us where to find you when we can't find you. But where do you like to power down?
Monon Trail.
Okay. All right. I often do wonder
Do a
how
lot
you
of
get
walking.
everywhere you go.
A lot of walking, a lot of thinking. And it's interesting. People, the community loves their trails.
Yeah.
And while you're out there, to echo Mayor Peterson's comments about our city. We do have wonderfully friendly residents of the city, and while I'm on the Monon Trail, no one brings up potholes.
Gentlemen, you know, the life of public service is such a sacrifice. We thank you for your service. We thank you for your commitment to this city. And we thank you for your leadership that you have so graciously shared with us and with the next generation. Thank you for being here today. Let's give them a warm welcome and a warm thank you. Thank you so much, gentlemen.